All right. Welcome, everybody. This is Romanoos Mattonen?
Mattonen.
Mattonen? Yeah, I didn't take any kind of, yeah, sorry.
I usually
Yeah,
just go by Romanoos.
yeah, Domino's, Romanoos, her, that one, the beautiful lady in the picture. She's going to do the oil pastel demo on landscapes, and thank you for tuning in. It will be recorded onto our CCAA YouTube channel, and Romanus, you can connect that to that site also if you would like. So I'm going to hand it over to you, and I know that you went to San Francisco to school for art, right?
I went to California College of the Arts for my bachelor, and I went to Academy of Art University for my master's.
Nice. Nice. And did that something that you were going to do your whole, does that knew you were going to do that?
Oh, yes. I knew I would pursue art since I was a child. Yeah, there's no other path for me.
I hear you. I hear you. Now, so this, you've chosen a seascape. I love it. Is this on somewhere close? Where is
So
that
this is
at?
Big Sur, and this actually was a painting one of my students did, and I just loved it. And I asked if I can have permission to paint it as well, and she said yes. So here we are.
Oh my
And
gosh.
what
The photo, she did a wonderful job.
I cropped it. Hers was more zoomed out, so I cropped it to have it look more intimate. What I love about paintings or references like this is it's very moody. Whenever you have that suggestion of depth, especially photo references, they define all the edges, everything's so sharp, so it almost flattens what my intentions are, just give it more of that range. And so, in my painting, I'm hoping to emphasize more of that.
Are you thinking of value or color when you do that?
First and foremost, it's always value. Value is the backbone, the foundation of a solid painting. Color is just, salt. It's just the sprinkle of finesse and making everything come to life. But more important than anything else is your value.
So
So
when
making
you're
sure that
working in that medium, and it's not
Mhm.
like oils or acrylics or watercolor where you
Mhm.
can mix grays, do you work with grays or do you work?
So if I were to paint with oil, which is my preferred medium, you can mix your beautiful
Right.
blacks, and then from that you can make your grays. With this particular material, this is what I'm using. It is Artist Soft Oil Pastel. Now I like this soft. I just happened to stumble upon it, and it's lovely because it almost feels like oil bars.
Mm.
And I'm not sure if you've ever used it, but it almost glides creamy and soft, very much like an oil painting. Regular pastels without the soft part feels too much like crayons to me. It's a you can actually feel the wax, which
Right.
I don't care for. So when I stumbled upon this, I just love it. I'm also not a huge fan of just regular pastels, only because the chalkiness, breathing it in. I personally don't like it so dry on my hands. So this is perfect for me. The limitations, however, that you're facing with is you have to layer. There's no way of mixing or pre-mixing as you would do on your oil painting, and then you paint on from your palette onto your painting. However, this, it's nothing but layers and layers. But surprisingly, what's wonderful about this is even if you have a darker foundation, let's say you're using your darker, let's say your range from 5 to 9 on your value scale, you can still go on with a white and just paint right on top of it. And it that marks shows.
So you work dark to light with this.
Absolutely, absolutely. But it depends. If I am painting a landscape, for example, I will I will start with my background. I typically like to work from inside out. So
Mm.
anything that's further away, I like to capture first, and then I'll come back and come closer, get darker. Um, I do not push my lightest light and my darkest dark until the very end. So I reserve my number 1 value and my number 9 value if I'm working from a 1 to 9 value range. So, but typically on a landscape, especially with this, I move fast. There's a lot to cover, and I'll be very honest with you. There's a lot of ugly stage with this material. To a point where I was painting and I was just getting familiar with this material. And my daughter, she's 7, she comes along, she goes, "Mama, I can do that." So it's, kind of wounded my ego a little bit, but if you bear with me, it actually has the final result. It has this velvety, creamy aesthetic to it, which is just quite lovely. So what I love about this entire set, you can get it from Amazon. It's like 20, $30. I showed you what the brand is. Here it is.
I did. I wrote it down in our chat.
This is the paper that I am using. Oil pastel pads. It's 123 pound. What I like about it, it doesn't have too much tooth. What I have found is if it has too much texture, I'm kind of fighting that along as I paint. I've got all those like, pits to kind of, push my pigment down into. This is quite smooth. However, it's not so smooth that I don't have enough tooth. So you need the tooth in order to layer your material.
What was the brand name?
This is Oil Pastel Pad. It's by GRDZ Plus or Plus and Art and Craft. I just found it on Amazon. Amazon's like for me, it's like a kid in a candy store. I will just go and just try and experiment. And if I don't like it, I mean, if they're not terribly expensive, I'm not an artist who believes that you have to spend an arm and a leg in order to get good paintings. So for me, I feel like the most important tool that you have is your knowledge. And the only way to get better knowledge is experimenting and playing and practicing and repetition. So it all goes hand in hand. Now, granted, there are wonderful, amazing colors that you can get by spending, a lot of money. Is it necessary? I don't think so. Yeah.
Have you ever mixed different brands together?
I have, and it's
So
okay.
it's okay. It does, that same soft pastel works.
Yeah. Again, I do like the soft oil pastel, and if I were to, I would layer more of this on top. Now, if you are going to paint this, let's say you're going to do mixed medium, and you have to be aware of which one is your fat versus lean, right? So if you were going to paint acrylic, you would paint that underneath, your oils on top, right? Well, oil pastels, especially these soft oil pastels, they never really dry, right? So because they have that wax within it. So interesting enough, I would paint this on top of my oil paintings. So I would not do it the other way around, because if your oil paints were to be painted on top of your soft oil pastels, your oil underneath would dry, these would not, your painting would ultimately crack.
So can these be, after they're put down, can you use a solvent or turpentine or whatever on them, or no?
You may, absolutely. You can, it's very versatile. You can do quite a bit with it. Alcohol, you can also do, you can just use oil, just safflower oil would work really well. I don't use anything. I just use the material as it is, and it's rich and creamy, and it makes beautiful paintings. So if I were to start, which I'm going to start now, so I will speak a lot more about materials and the branding, if you like, but I'm excited to get started.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm not familiar with all the colors. With my oil paintings, I know my colors really well. With these, I don't. So I'm just going to, as I'm doing this demo, I'm going to say a dark blue, light green, dark green. I will say the color temperature of them to help guide you. But for the majority, I don't want to spend too much time trying to come up with periwinkle blue, right?
Yeah.
Versus.
Well, and if somebody's using a different brand, then.
Mauve, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. When I do my original drawing, I'm just looking at a neutral color. And I'm squinting and I'm just looking for basic shapes. Now, it is quite helpful to have your photo reference and the size of your paper or your canvas to be relatively the same size. I find it extremely helpful. But even if you don't have that and you're looking at drawn foundation, you can just kind of eyeball halfway, midpoint on both of them to kind of give you landmarks of where to place things. So if I were to do my sketch, I'm not sure if you can see that. Yeah.
Yep.
I do not spend a lot of time on my drawing foundation. Now, this is landscape. Landscape is incredibly forgiving. And so, for example, I can see that this needs to be raised, and I'll just raise it. So it really does look like chicken scratch. I am a predominantly portrait painter. With that, I would spend a lot of time making sure my proportions are accurate. With landscape, I don't. So I lean to my professor, his name was Craig Nelson, and he taught me to pretty much paint fast at the beginning and slow down at the end. So panic at the beginning means rush it.
Panic at the beginning, what?
Panic at the beginning, slow down at the end. And that way, your paintings don't need to be refined. They're just loose. You have room to manipulate it and make corrections and modifications. But for the most part, that is my drawing. Looks like my daughter can do it. I am going to, again, like I said, I do reserve my darkest dark for the very end. So I am going to just start back here. Now, this does not blend, so I can't possibly blend. So what I'm going to do is my first battle is to cover up all these holes. There is a bit of a tooth on this paper, so I'm pushing in deep, and I'm just starting out with a general color that I see in here. It's quite blue, it's further back in space, it gives me that atmosphere, and I'm just gonna block in everything. I'm not too particular about trying to get the definition of this is darker, and this is lighter, this is cooler, this is warmer. I don't worry about any of that right now.
It's almost like an underpainting.
Absolutely, you're just blocking in. But again, my focus is to cover up as much of this white as possible. Because if I don't do that, it's going to come back at the end and haunt me. Now, I want to get a little bit more depth in this painting. So for example, from here to here, this whole range, it looks similar in value. If I squint, it almost becomes one huge mountain, just more definition. So I want to get a little bit more layer of depth. So I want mine to be a little bit lighter up in here. So you see, I can't blend. The only way for me to blend is just to layer a new lighter color on top.
Unless you used an oil or something with a brush.
Correct. In which I don't care to do that. I like mine to, and I guess it's because I have a tendency of just using whatever I have in my hand.
Does it lend itself to more of a line quality?
It can if you go all linear. So you have to be mindful of making plane changes. So I'm constantly moving my shoulders.
Yeah.
My elbows and my wrist. So you can go circular, you can make lots of different marks as long as they're not going in the same direction. What I don't like seeing, and I don't like seeing it in my students, is this, when they just go like
Yeah.
wax on, wax off, like a Karate Kid. That, remember that little clip when he's
Yeah.
painting that fence? That's what I don't care. So I like there to seem to be more movement, and the only way to actually get that is to make marks in different directions.
And this medium allows you to paint or draw or whatever over the top of it. It doesn't lose, like I know in chalk pastels, you use up the tooth if you fill in too much.
Correct. I'm pretty comfortable with making maybe 7, 8, 9 passes without losing that tooth.
Wow.
It's it's actually very easy. What I love about this is I have so many students that come up with so many excuses of why they can't paint. They don't have the space, they travel, it's expensive, whatever the reason are. These This material is wonderful to travel with. It's affordable. You don't need a big space, and you can still create. And this can just be just like a practice for your larger, or studies for your larger paintings.
Do you then take wax paper with you or something to put between if you're traveling?
You can absolutely, but this the soft oil pastels came with this film right over it.
Uh-huh.
And it's like this little bubbly sheet, kind of like they use in packaging.
Yeah.
And that's what I would just do. Easy.
Yes.
And it's also wonderful if you want to just rest your hand, which I tend to
Oh,
do.
great idea.
Then you can just go and rest your hand
Pro
without
tip.
worrying it's smearing.
Pro tip.
Because it does smear. I mean, I'm not sure if you can tell, but it does smear. So you just have to be mindful of that.
What's your focal point? Amanda wants to know.
So obviously the focal point is anything that is darker, more contrast, sharper edges. So this would definitely be, this whole area would be my focal point. Okay, so now I've got a good lighter value back there, lighter than my photo reference. I'm going to start blocking in some of these warmer color temperatures. My color light source is warm, so I know that all my shadows are going to be cool. I know that as I advance, I'm going to get warmer. I'm going to get sharper, more texture.
You don't work cool and then warm. You go back and forth.
I definitely go back and forth. What I have found is that if you're using one color, and even if you're mixing watercolor, oil, acrylic, whatever, if you're mixing one color and you like that color and it's an accurate color, let's say it's here, what I have noticed is that the students who use that, they also use it here, they use it here, they use it here, and they use it here.
Yeah.
I don't
yeah.
tend to do that. I constantly mix. And the more you mix, the more you're attuned with making those colors faster. And my job is to paint as fast as I can, accurately, and paint it well with movement, not boring.
Yeah.
Whenever I see a painting stiff, it's just their edges are too sharp. If I see it that it's too tight, if that happens, it's because your painting is too tight from the beginning, meaning you spent too much time on your drawing.
Oh, there's a thought.
We have a tendency, I believe, that we go tighter and tighter as we progress. I think it's our natural tendency is just to find the details and render and all that good stuff. But if you keep it loose, you're experimenting, you're navigating, and you're making decisions. If it's wrong, if it's not right, you can make corrections. And you can see right now, I have a lot of corrections to do, but that's okay. As long as I keep working fast, filling in these holes. You see how these holes are just
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
pain? I think that's the one main thing that I don't care about this material. But then towards the end, I'll show you a little trick that I found that helped. But you can see that I'm not going in straight lines. I'm going in lots of different angles.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that I predominantly work in watercolor, and I try acrylic, try to get looser, but I'm going to try your fast first
Mhm.
because I was trained to paint, to draw very precisely, and so even when I'm
Mhm.
painting, I end up being too fussy.
So you have one of the most difficult materials to work with. Watercolor is very unforgiving. You have to reserve your whites, so it doesn't lend itself to making so many corrections as easily for me. For example, if
I
I
could
do
show you how.
this, and if
I
I
could
do
show you
this,
how.
I can just wipe over it. But in
Right.
watercolor, you can't. You
Right.
have that's definitely a limitation, which I don't have. And number two, it depends on your subject matter. I'm dealing with landscape. If I want to put a tree somewhere, or if it's not 100, my angle's not correct, it doesn't matter. Once I take this photo reference away, you can't see what I did, and you would never know that it's not correct.
Yeah, it's not, you're not working in photorealism.
I certainly can't. Just that, what I found is people who paint very photorealistically, they're very talented. It takes a lot of skill, but more than anything, it just takes more time.
Oh yeah.
You're picking it to death. I find it being more difficult to edit and choose what to paint and what to not paint.
Now, when you're working on your portraits, you're very meticulous in there in things.
I
Do you
am.
also have a looseness when you do portraits?
I do. So, for example, if I'm doing a portrait and I'm painting the eye or the eyes, which are the focal point most often, then I'm choosing to not make both of them the same, meaning the same level of detail, as the highlight not as bright, um, not as crisp. So those are decisions I have to make. Even though they're rendered, they're not rendered evenly. And I think that's what most artists get stuck in. They see it in the photo, they think photorealism, or not just realism, photorealism, but also trompe l'oeil. They feel like everything has to be at this high level of detail. And in fact, the more you get like that, the more I believe your painting looks flat.
Yeah.
So you can see how I'm have to layer my colors. This is way different than but I need to layer because I don't want to just go in there and say it's brown.
Right.
That to me, that's very one note.
And it's a warm brown. And how do you get that if you put the brown down? Right.
Well, brown itself is typically the color relationship is relative, right? And brown is a warm color, warmer than other colors. But what I like is this effect. I'm not sure if you can
Yeah.
see it. When we start
Yeah.
getting to
When the other color drops through, or you leave space that it breathes.
yeah, the negative shape is just exciting. But right now you can see I'm just layering. And what I happen to do is I end up doing this. At first I get all nice and organized but I just start stacking it in my hands.
do you tend to use the same color, or are you afraid to drop in a surprise color?
No, um, I like to kind of base on what I see as fast as I can, because again, I don't want to have the luxury of time. Because if I do, if I have a month to this painting, I'll take it. And I don't want to. I want to be able to get this done as fast so I don't get overworked. I think that's when some students or some artists get in trouble of their work getting overworked, because they just feel like they have all the time to just pick it and pick it and pick it. And before
Yeah.
you know it, they've lost that initial intuitive marks that they just got the first couple of rounds into their painting. So you can see I'm not really interested in my shapes. I just know I'm blocking things in. And just keep layering. I like the value difference from here to here. You can see how mine has a little bit more atmosphere than
Yeah.
my photo reference. I like that. However, I am lacking the segregation of the cool and the warms, which I will pick up later.
And you layered a lighter, maybe not white, but a lighter color to blend those a little in the back.
These, I actually used a lighter,
Blue.
it's called light gray.
Oh, great.
I tried to, I
I
haven't
saw that
actually,
you brought some of the sky color down into it too, to
yeah.
give it some atmospheric perspective.
So ultimately, what I want to do is I want this whole painting to be harmonious. And the only way to do that is to balance some of what's up here, down in here, what's up down here, onto up there.
Right.
And the reason why I did the color of the sky down is so I can have a nice soft edge. And that you can see how this is
Yeah.
very sharp and mine is not. This is me using the knowledge that I have of how to paint atmospheric perspective into my paintings, that mine has more depth already.
And that pushes that mountain back and gives you a lot more depth.
Yep, it just gives me more range, and that's definitely what I want. So for me, it's getting a little streaky. I'm not sure if you're seeing it. So I'm coming back with my white and I'm hitting it in a different angle. So if all the original lines were going in this direction from, like, let's say 1 o'clock to 6, 7 o'clock, now my lines are going more horizontal to kind of,
Fill in some of those holes. You don't want your details back there.
no, not at all. But what I eliminated is the lines, the marks from it being so, it was going this way. And so I went and did the complement and went the opposite direction. There's some violet in here. I have to be careful because I don't want too much violet back there. Violet is a warmer color. It's relative, but it is a warmer color compared to my blue. So I'm going to knock it back again with my light gray. And pick up some of that warmth. And what's wonderful is, I mean, I can just paint right over it and it just comes, it's so flexible. There's some warmth here. So a lot of artists that tone their canvases originally, they don't like working on a white canvas. This is very similar. So if I just paint this whole thing one color, let's say this base color, that's almost like saying this is my toned canvas and I want some of those colors peeking through, and that's kind of what is happening in here.
Do you ever do that when you're painting in pastel, tone your colors? Or tone
No, no, I've never done that. No.
Do you do it in oil?
Yes, it depends. Sometimes I get a little just too excited and I just want to paint. And so
Oh, I'm so excited. It's painting day.
the other thing is, if my palette is toned, like you got the palette paper that's gray, then I will tone my canvas. Ultimately, what you want is you want your palette and your canvas to be similar in value. So if you got a white canvas, then the paper, the palette that you're working with on the bottom should also be white.
So when you mix your colors, they're the colors that show up on the surface.
Exactly. There's like no surprise. And now I'm somewhere here. And I think this is where a lot of artists will get stumped. They don't know what color to mix because again, it's a lot of color mixing. But instead of color mixing and trying to get an immediate result, I have to layer.
Right.
And if you don't know enough about, or if you're not confident enough about your color mixing, this is gonna, it
This
can
will
be,
jumpstart you.
yeah, it could be a very frustrating process. So I would say, know your values, but then color mixing. And the only way to get good at color mixing is mix,
Exactly.
just like anything else. Just do it.
Yeah, one of my first assignments in watercolor was doing color charts, and it was boring, but I could mix any color you want.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember those classes. Very helpful. Very helpful.
They definitely train you to know what you, and I think it has to be, whatever your medium or whatever your colors are, because they
Mhm.
always change them, different brands.
Mm-hmm. I have a very different method of color mixing. Um, uh, for example, if I want to make a neutral color, let's say this color here,
Mhm.
then I will look at my palette and I would just say, out of all the colors that are out of the tube, not mixed, which one is this closer to?
Right.
And I would start with that color as the base. Then I would add a cool or a warm, depending on what it is. And then I'll just ask myself, do I need to get lighter or darker? And
So
I'll just go,
if you start with a warm, you go to a cool next.
well, it just depends. So for example, if I'm here and if I pick up, let's say burnt sienna,
Yeah.
well then burnt sienna is too warm compared to this. So then I have to add a cool to help neutralize that burnt sienna. And the complement of burnt sienna, well, burnt sienna is more in the orange family, so I'll go into more of the blues. All right, I'm just gonna block in the water just to have everything in. So you see, my daughter did it. It's
Yeah.
so interesting because uh, a long time ago, I would never let anyone see my work in progress. And it's because of this. I mean,
Yeah.
look how amateur it looks.
No art criticism is what I tell my students. No criticizing the artist within. And I don't let them tear out their sketch pad. Don't throw things away because you're going to go back and go, man, that was better than I thought it was.
Um, Interesting how a lot of students no longer do sketches. They lost the patience, I feel. People just want to instant gratification. They just want to paint and they run into issues that they could have resolved had they had sketched something in their pad.
I have a sketchbook by the computer, by the TV, in my car, in my purse, in my studio. They're everywhere.
Oh my gosh, that's great. That takes discipline.
Well, one of the best things that somebody told me was like, if you're watching a show that people repeat, or the news that the people repeat, that to draw a person or
Mm-hmm.
a scene that keeps coming up you have to do it quickly
Mm-hmm.
because it's going to be gone in a couple of seconds, but it's going to come back around. So you can then draw the whoever. And the Oscars, I do the Oscars all the time and draw the clothing and these quick little sketches of people and clothing and hair, and because it pushes you to do it quickly.
Oh wow. I think I would resort to freezing my my TV on.
That's
That's
okay.
So you can see that my drawing, I'm just correcting my drawing. I'm just constantly
So was
looking and
that a black that you
reevaluating.
put on, or was that just a dark?
This one is a dark brown, just a dark brown. Again, I don't use my darkest darks until the very end. So I'll refrain from using a value as dark as black. And What I also am quite mindful of is making sure I'm going in the direction of what I see. So for example, there is a very horizontal mark that's happening in the
Mhm.
water. So I'll try to replicate that.
But your last strokes will show up
Yes.
on top, yeah.
Oh yeah.
If anyone has any questions, you can put them in the chat or unmute yourself and ask. Don't be afraid. You want to know something?
So I'm just layering, just lots of layers. The other thing I've noticed is that these colors right out of the tube, they're so bright, they're so saturated. And I personally don't like color, a painting that's too colorful.
Yeah, it's like right out of the tube.
Exactly. And I also don't like paintings that are too colorful everywhere. I like it to be more isolated and to your focal point or primary, secondary, or tertiary focal points. But having color everywhere to me, I feel like also flattens. It's kind of like having, I can tell my students, having sugar for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I just
Yeah.
get too much of it. But if you
Yeah.
have it after a nice steak and then you have a nice cheesecake, something like that, it just tastes so much better. Like that nice balance of value, color temperature, um, color saturation, edge control. All of that will make a very successful painting.
And how do you frame these? If they
Um,
don't dry?
so I put a little mat around it, and that little edge gives me a space between the painting and the glass.
Just like a watercolor.
Correct.
Can this type of a material be done on canvas or a board that you could spray then, or no?
You can definitely put this on any material or any surface. The only problem I see is you're dealing with a lot more texture.
Mhm.
And even now, all those little, I call it snow. Um, for me, it drives me nuts. So I would have to come back and rework it. For some artists that they actually might embrace that and like that, I don't. I think it's very distracting. And now I'm just looking and slowly, this is too bright. So I know if I'm in orange, I want to neutralize. So I'll hit it with a layer of gray. Now, again, I don't want to layer too much of it because I don't want to cover, this can easily cover all of it. I don't want to do
Right.
that. So I have to be careful of just going and crisscross or
Circles or
circles
whatever.
or yeah, squiggly marks. So I don't cover too much of it. But at the end, it has a really pretty way of the material dancing next to each other. And it just glides. It's just really nice. So I gotta separate this
It's not
back.
floppy.
No, not at all. It's quite hard and solid. It's very much, I'm not sure if you've ever worked with oil bars.
Yeah, long time ago.
So oil bars feel quite the same. However, they're just really thick as far as the girth, and this is a lot thinner. But it glides this very similar. Now keep in mind, this is very different from regular soft pastels.
Right.
But again, what I love about this is that you can paint one of these. And I actually, when I was first found this, I was doing one pretty much every night watching TV. And I don't really need to focus too much about it. I just keep playing with it and just filling in. And then just at the very end, I can start refining and putting in all the details. But it's just such it's an easy material. Very different from what you do with your watercolor.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I keep trying to get the line aspect in the watercolors, and I was trained with watercolor only, no blacks, mixed color.
Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh.
and I need to not be afraid to mix media. Use a pencil in it.
Mhm.
Use a water, the Caran d'Ache aquarelle is a crayon like these, except that it's a water-based
Mhm. I've
crayon.
used them.
I've seen people use that intermixed with their paintings and leave the line work. And I went,
Mm.
oh, I could do that. And
Mhm.
but it's you were trained, no.
Mm.
So I have to force myself to let go.
I think with watercolor, the most difficult thing is your edges. All of your edges are so sharp because they dry. No matter what you do, it has an end, and trying to get that softness is so difficult.
Oh, you can get that soft edge easily.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I would love to take your workshop.
anytime. You know where to find me. We could trade. You could do this for me and tell me to go fast.
Yeah. I mean, I think watercolor is it's quite beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
I love the transparency and the colors, the way they mix. Watercolor, I always tell everybody, likes to help you paint.
Mm,
And you have to let go of some control so that because it's going to do what it wants to do. And you think you have control. And then it
yeah.
goes, yeah, no. We're going
Yeah.
this way. But just like this, the more that you do it, the more you know, and the more you can have happy accidents on purpose.
Yeah. I'm very OCD, so I do like my control.
Yeah.
But you can start seeing how it's slowly coming to life.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of depth that's happening in the background there that's just sort of all of a sudden kind of popped up.
And what's really nice is I feel like this is kind of like a simmering pot. It's slow. It's not an immediate. And so at the very end, it's very gratifying to see where it started and where it ended up.
Does it surprise you?
Sometimes, at the beginning, not at the beginning, at the end of my painting, I'll look and I'll be like, yeah, that didn't work. And then I'll come back the next day and be like, oh, that's quite pretty.
That's
So
why I tell people don't throw away, don't judge too quickly, walk away.
yeah. And just blocking in. What's really nice about this material is it's so forgiving that if I make a mistake, I know, and I'm confident enough to just go back and fix things, but I feel like it lends itself to making mistakes. So for example, this guy, I'm not sure if you can see, it needs to be
Yeah.
moved over. I need to overlap this mountain. So that's what I'm going to do.
And you can put down a dark and put the light over this.
Absolutely, like right here. So long as I feel like I have enough tooth, I can do that. And it's there. I have it. And I can go lighter. So there's two ways of making this appear lighter. One, to go lighter, you can see how much room I
yeah.
have. I have a lot of room. But the other option is to go just darker right behind the water. And so I would say if I were to spend an hour on this painting, I would spend maybe 30 minutes on getting everything blocked in. So if there's anything that's not covered by now, I need to just keep moving.
Covered up. Well, we're at 4:41, so you're coming up 15 minutes-ish on an hour. So you did really great.
I'm only in 15 minutes.
It's 4:41, so we've got like a little more than 15 minutes or more because we can go over an hour. Went faster than you thought, huh?
Very. It's surprising how much more work this is compared to an oil painting.
just because of the layering.
Mm-hmm.
I think in other mediums, you mix it on the palette or with watercolor on the paper, but you definitely, it mixes itself. You're not doing this constant judgment of what you're seeing and what you're looking at and what's next to it, and then working from a blue into a hazy gray blue,
Correct. I got to be mindful of my colors and what color it will make by the color underneath. Because again, I'm doing cross hatches like this, so the color
Yeah.
underneath is affecting the color I'm putting on top, and so it just takes so much longer. But I think it just has again a more of a velvety feel, and I think it's quite pretty.
It is definitely velvety looking.
And the other thing is there's so many colors.
Yeah, do you limit yourself to a certain amount or do you give yourself free rein?
I have free reign, but I mean, I don't need 17 different greens to work with.
Yeah.
Relatively, I mean, if it's an oil painting, I need a cool green and a warm green. But with this, I have so many, and it's nice if you can just pick it in. But it also just makes you think more, and that takes time. And you can start seeing I'm just getting a little bit more vibrancy because, again, this is my focal point. I want this to have more saturation of color. And then a little bit brighter here. I can go a little bit darker here. Again, I'm dealing with a warm light source, so my shadows are going to be cooler. So right in here.
And this kind of painting and the way that you're painting this, you don't put a lot of details in.
You certainly can if you have the time. But if I squint, there isn't really that much detail in a painting like this. I mean, maybe in here, these rock formations, but for the most part, you just want to get the essence, the character of the image. And then just start blocking in these guys. And if you notice the way I'm holding the bars, I'm holding it like I would a brush. I'm not holding it like a pencil.
I just had somebody say, you hold it like a wand, like a Harry Potter wand. I'm going, I try to get my students not to hold it, choke down like a pen or pencil.
Uh-huh.
And I've never heard the wand thing. I'm going, that's pretty good. Wand. I like that.
That's nice. I'll take that.
Well, and you don't have as much control when you're holding it there. It moves more in your hand.
So again, if you're holding it like a pencil, you have the tendency of going tight.
Right.
And I'm not at that stage yet to go tight. By holding it this way, I'm just moving faster and making more suggestions. So you can see how dark that is, and I don't want it to be that dark. I've lost my atmosphere, so I've got to hit it with a cool and a lighter.
But you want the value darker, so you started with a darker value.
Yeah, sometimes it's just make a mistake, and that's I don't pick up the right
You're
exact
not
color.
necessarily starting with a dark and painting into light.
No, I wanted it dark, but that was way too dark and it was way too warm.
Okay.
And you can see how these are too big, and I can just knock it back by the surrounding information of the water. So I'm not too worried about that. I got that guy here. I got this guy. I got a little guy, and I've got this formation here. And I don't know, maybe just a little suggestion of something here. And if I'm pressed for time, I think I would start doing some detailing. So I want some lights hitting the base to suggest the crashing of the waves. This is way too low, so try to get rid of it. And you can see that I have a good amount of room to move it, and that's not even using white. So then I can come
Can
back
you
with white.
scrape back this medium?
I'm sorry?
Could you scrape back?
You can certainly scrape. The one nice thing about having that blocking in of your color originally, you can just scrape it and you can pick it up underneath. So that's definitely a technique you can use. I wouldn't use it in a painting that's this far away. It's more of an atmospheric painting because again, it creates such a sharp edge, and
Right.
that sharp edge pulls your eye into that particular spot, and it's distracting unless it's a very defined focal point that you want.
I just wondered if you could pick up some color you put down that you didn't like.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, if you didn't like it, then you can just paint over it. It's just so just very forgiving. So you can see that
Because
I'm
it's not mixing to make muddy colors.
right. I can if I didn't know the colors to mix.
Right.
So again, I think if you're ever frustrated with this material, it's because you're having a hard time deciding what color to put. So I'm going here. I need to go a little bit warmer because this is closer to the viewer. A little bit of negative space so it doesn't look so solid. This is a reflection. A little bit brighter here. I've got to correct this guy's drawing. That's another thing is I've noticed in my students that the ones that hesitate to make corrections are the ones that don't have a strong drawing foundation. They're worried to lose their original marks, their original lines, because they may not have the confidence to make the corrections or get it back.
Right.
So I would say the two most important things in a painting, obviously composition and value. This is creating a halo. I was trying to fix that contour edge and it created a halo. So I've got to go back and go horizontal into it so it doesn't create that.
Line around it.
Yeah.
But it just covered right up. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. And then we can just stand back and look at it and see a little bit warmer here. Again, I don't have anything that's like that peach, so I've got a mix between these two.
Okay.
And you can start seeing the more layered I get, the creamier it's starting to feel. And this is starting to feel very dotty. So
Oh, yes, I see what you mean by your popcorn or your snowflakes.
no. So go back. What kind of stinks about this material or this medium is that a lot of colors that I did like and all that work that I put in, it can completely just get covered over. So it's just having a very light touch so you don't cover too much of it. So it's just going back and forth and keep adding and adding. So it's fun, but it's just more work. And there's this hill that's kind of doing something like this. A little bit of green that's kind of here. And a bit of reflection down on this guy. That's too bright and too sharp back there. And if you want the suggestion of detail, what you do is you just dab it. And it
Little dots and dashes.
It reads like detail, even though it's not.
We're coming up on the 5-minute mark.
Mhm.
How much more work would you do on this? If, would you just like fill in your little snowflake? Would you add a little bit more of your darks and lights?
I mean, I definitely would push this maybe another half hour because that's where all the detail comes in. I think we spent, I think it's I spent a little too much at the beginning talking.
It's okay. If you send us a picture when you're done of this, we could post it on our webpage and
Oh, that's perfect.
maybe a picture now and then when you're done, and then we could compare.
That would be great.
That'd be great. Thank you.
And a little bit more detailed here. And then I'll show you what I'll do with some of the snow, which is driving me bonkers. So you can see at the beginning, it just starts to look like chicken scratch, and then now it's starting to slowly come to life. Put in a little bit of negative space in here. So then what I like to do is I'll take a chopstick. This one was a little too light. Get that back. So then I'll take my chopstick and I will just go ahead and fill up all those little holes. And that original,
Like a stump almost.
pretty much. I like these longer ones because I can just hold it further back
Right.
and actually not rub and scrape. But what's nice is if you, I'm not sure if you can zoom in, but a lot of that color that I had underneath, that blue, is just being picked up and smearing into all those holes.
Gotcha.
And so by doing this, I can pick up some of that dark, give that a little base, a little dark here, go in different directions. Give suggestions of information without actually doing anything.
Nice.
Yeah, and then after this, I will just push in my darkest dark, some of my lighter lights. So I have a full value range that I'm dealing with. And I'm going in the direction that I see things. So I am being mindful of what I'm painting. I want this guy to stand out a little bit more, this guy. So I'm going to go a little darker behind him, which I see. So in order to correct an issue, maybe the issue is not the issue, there's something else that can be addressed.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of like
I had to
marriage.
think about that for a minute.
Huh?
I had to think about that for a minute.
Oh, it's kind of like marriage. The issue is not the issue.
The issue's not the issue. Yeah, it's the issue.
A little darker here. And I can just blend. It's a little too sharp of an edge here. Knock it down. A little bit more white. And then I'll bounce in some of that coral.
Yes, I know. My dog is whining because it's 5 o'clock and it's dinner time.
I won't keep you
He knows
guys.
he can tell time. You're fine.
Now I like to bounce some of that light that's hitting the sky down in here. Just touch it so it's more harmonious, which I spoke about at the beginning. And let's push the darkest dark. So instead of going straight to black, I'll just maybe pick up a dark violet.
Oh, okay.
So again, if I were to go to black, let me just show you how much darker I have, my range. I'm not sure if
Oh,
you see that.
yeah.
I still have a good amount that I can still play with. I rather slowly build up my values,
Mhm.
just like my colors. I just like doing things slower. As far as layering, I mean, I layer fast, but I like to not jump in and go dark, dark immediately. And I certainly don't like to punch up all my bright colors. I like a lot of those muted colors first. So then when I put in some of those brights, they stand out more. I need to fix this rock formation here. A bit more gray. You can see I'm just constantly correcting my drawing. And I think it's also I just have the patience of an ant. I don't want to spend too much time at that beginning stage. I just want to paint. But especially with landscape, I know that if I can make adjustments, they're easy to do. Now, I wouldn't advise that if you're doing a portrait or a figure in an environment painting. What do you think? It's
Beautiful.
kind of getting there. I feel
Yeah.
like this and this, and now I'm looking at the screen. This can get a little darker. So I'll just take black and I'll just go very lightly over the whole thing.
So that some of the color is still poking out.
But I just darken it up. I just feel like this is too dark, so I'm just blending it all together. Now I feel like this and this are pretty much similar in the value range. I want this to be lighter, so I'm going to scrape this back down.
So now you're lifting some paint.
Exactly. Because I want my painting to have more range than this. And as you come forward, your values get darker. Or should get darker. And there should be a little bit more orange here. Yeah.
It's beautiful. The depth from the original to photograph to this is much more depth in your mountain range. It's very nice.
Thank you. It's I think always the magic happens at the very end. So I definitely will work this a little bit more and let you see it finished. These rocks need a lot more work. But it's definitely a wonderful medium. And I think that's what I'm trying to do is encourage you guys to play with it because you can travel with it really easily. It's very inexpensive and you don't need a huge workspace to create it.
Just yeah, you don't have to have water or mediums or whatever. You have just your pastels and your paper, right?
Yeah. And I put my paper on just like one of these boards,
Uh-huh.
like a wood board or any surface or canvas board. And you can just tape it on and just put it on your lap and paint in front of the TV.
You did say you did it in front of the TV.
Yeah. And just get a little bit of variation in there. A little darker in here. Little greens in here. And if you do like color and you do want it more saturated, you can go back at the very end and you can, it's easily punch up those brights.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's always more difficult to get the darks and the more muted.
Well, and when you change the value, things change for everything else.
Absolutely. I'm going to add a little bit of pink in here. And you can go back and really pay attention to all the angles of these hills and plane changes. So that one got a little too dark for me. I'm going to knock it back. I feel like this is the wand. It's like a blending.
No, it is totally the magic wand. Excellent.
Yeah, just going back in there and going in different directions gets that blue.
Yeah.
And it just gives me more layers.
And then can you carry it does it attach itself to that stick and you can kind of put it some other places or no?
You mean, yeah, well, I
Kind of.
don't care for the little, I don't know, what do you call it? The little pellets, whatever these
Oh,
called.
so you
These
just
little,
wipe them off.
I do only because when you frame it, it stands out too much, it protrudes forward too much, so it actually can hit the glass.
Gotcha.
So remember the green I did in here, the original green, that dark green? I can actually just pick that up and get that beautiful. And I'll zoom in when it's all relatively done, so you can see it zoomed in. Adding a little bit more color. So for example, this is a little bit more pronounced. So I can go in here, it's hitting right in front of this guy, so right in here, and I can just pick it up.
Right over that dark.
Right over the top, yeah. It's leaning a little bit more orange, so hit it with a little bit of orange. Make it a little bit more pronounced by having a little bit of dark right above it. Correct my shape with my wand. And blend. Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent.
It's just fun. I hope everyone tries it and plays with it.
Can you zoom in on that before we stop the?
Absolutely. Let me do this.
It'll be bigger if you also take the display off of Romanoos
Oh,
itself.
yeah. Okay, good. Hang on, Romanoos, don't move. There we go.
Much bigger. Yeah, yeah.
Nice. Oh, yeah.
Wow.
So you see all that snow?
Yeah.
Irritates the zoom. It's so frustrating. So you see how the sky got creamier?
Yeah.
No snow. And it just really pretty layering that's starting to happen.
Yeah. And it looks like you're drawing in texture with that stick as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
So again, it's scratching and it's appropriate. So I did it here where I like that green here.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't want it back here because again, that scratching, it creates such a sharp edge. It takes your focus to that area because of that sharp edge, and it's also you're scraping in, so that's creating more texture, and you don't want that. So I do want it here where my focal point is, but I don't want it, let's say, up here.
So you would fix that by just going back with the pastel sticks again?
Correct.
Mm-hmm. And is it possible to just run your finger over it to smooth it, or that just doesn't work?
You can. I personally don't like a smeared look.
Uh-huh.
I rather just have it more layered so that you can start seeing all these like beautiful blues and orange and there's yellow and there's a bit of green. I just think that it just makes it far more rich and exciting.
Yeah.
And so if you used the oil or what did you say, alcohol, that would smush those things together too much.
It would, yes.
Mm.
So I personally like how creamy this is starting to look. And it just has that atmosphere that I want, but I don't necessarily want that here. I want more texture here. So again, it's just having the variety that makes a successful painting.
Shaheen, you can unmute and ask a question if you'd like.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. How do you varnish this finished piece? I got here late, so I don't know if it's oil pastel or just a plain
So
pastel.
this is soft oil pastel.
Okay. And how do you varnish it?
I do not varnish it. There's a lot of information online of how to varnish it. One of them was quite creative is hairspray. I don't care for that only because if you wet underneath, this is paper. So ultimately, I don't want to wet my paper with anything because then it might deal with, what is it? buckling. I don't want to deal with
Yeah.
color changing or the value changing. So I just put it over a glass. You just make sure that it has a nice little thin mat. And that mat is what creates a barrier between your actual painting and the glass. And I just found that to be the simplest solution. And I also think that presentation wise, it just has a nice cleaner look to it.
Yeah, so the temperature, if it's in a warm room, it doesn't smudge or melt down the
No.
colors or anything.
Not at
Doesn't?
all.
Okay,
No.
thank you.
This is not enough, the binder in it is not a wax per se that melts. It's,
It does have wax, but I'll
but
be
it's
honest with you,
not, I think
I
it's
haven't-
probably,
I
No.
haven't taken it close to a torch and see if it melts. But I have not had any problem with it. I think it's quite it's the longevity of it is pretty good. But again, the
this an
main thing is
artist
it
quality?
can smear. So what you don't want is if you're gonna put it, let's say in a binder, just have another sheet on top of it. Like the simplest solution, but it can smear. And more importantly, it can scratch, which you just saw.
Right. Romanoos, does the brand say if it's an artist quality or a student quality?
It's professional. It's
So
it's
then
artist soft oil pastel professional. So I don't know.
it's probably a little better quality than some of the ones that might melt.
I mean, it does say professional, but I don't know if that's just a marketing gimmick or not. But
Yeah.
ultimately, for me, it's getting your hands to paint, getting your hands to move, getting your eyes to make decisions based on color, temperature, and value. It's practicing. And that's a good practice as an artist. It doesn't matter what your preferred medium is. It's just we all are dealing with similar things: composition, color, temperature, value, edge control, mark making. We're all dealing with the same, just a different medium. So it just gives you another opportunity of just practicing. So if it doesn't end up being a painting that you're going to keep and have around for 100 years, so be it. It's still a wonderful opportunity for you to play.
Practice makes perfect.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your time and all the information you have very generously shared to us. We
My
appreciate
pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
it. All right.
And I will upload when it's finished what you guys can see the finished result.
Thank you.
Thank you.